Vicki Hogarth, and welcome to Southwest Magazine. I'm joined today by Matthew Dickson, who's here to share his story of living with schizophrenia and why he chose to be a mental health advocate. Thank you so much for being here today, Matthew.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start off by just starting with your story. When did you first start noticing that something felt not right, and when did you find out that you are schizophrenic?
So my childhood was pretty good, idyllic, living here in St. Andrews. It was, I really shouldn't complain at all about my childhood. And going off to university, I went to Acadia University my first year, and I was low on energy. I went to the health clinic at the University Health Clinic, and they sent me for blood work. The blood work came back fine, and they sent me out the door, sort of saying, focus on the future, and that was that. So that was 1990. So I focused on the future and went that way. I had about one symptom about once a year creep up on me through university. I had 1 year at Acadia, then I came to UNB in Fredericton. And I told some friends about how I was feeling, but it was the early 90s. I didn't know about mental illness. We'd been taught mental health a little bit in health class in high school. Things like if you exercise too much, it could be an excuse, or not an excuse, but it's not healthy to exercise too much. You could be running away from a problem or that sort of thing. So I knew a little bit about that. You know, I'd obviously known about psychology and psyching people out. That was a term actually in the 80s, psyching people out. But didn't know about OCD or anxiety or depression, schizophrenia, bipolar. I didn't know about any of that stuff. I'd heard the words schizophrenia maybe twice in a movie, a couple movies, but it was inaccurately portrayed, split personality, Jekyll and Hyde, that sort of thing, and that's all I knew. So at the end of university, the disease was mild through university, and I didn't know I had it at the time. And at its worst, I was having suicidal thoughts, and that was near the end of my 5th year. So I went to get help. I went to the University Health Clinic again. They took me to the psych ward in Fredericton in the hospital, and that was my introduction into the mental health system. So so many weeks, maybe 2-3 months went by. It was a little blurry, and plus it's like a million years ago now. I can't remember very well, but a psychiatrist came up to me after a while and said, "We think you've got schizophrenia," and that was a real bombshell to drop on me. That was when I was 22. In 1994, and just 2 years earlier, when I was 20, I bicycled across Canada, and that was a real loved that trip, loved it, and it was such a high. I want to do more fun stuff like this, and then getting the diagnosis was a real low, like, oh my gosh, I've got to be on a medication now, and I had depression and anxiety as well as schizophrenia. Yeah, it was a real high to a real low. So,
what were the symptoms that you had at the time? I know you talk about sort of the way it's been portrayed in Hollywood, in magazines even, as not being accurate. What did you experience?
So, some of the symptoms that came on in university were feeling sort of blunted emotionally. Another one was feeling like I had a brain transplant. It felt like I had someone else's brain in my head making me think things and do things and say things that just weren't me. And that was actually before I biked across Canada. But these were mild in comparison to what was going to come down the tubes. And some of my memory went short-term, memory of like, I couldn't remember what I had for dinner the night before. Whereas before if I thought about it, I could come up with that fairly quickly. And when the disease hit, I guess another one was, it felt like I was watching things in 2 dimensions, not 3. And that sounds kind of trippy, but I also described it as like watching TV. You can see things in front of you, but it felt like I couldn't interact with them. I felt disconnected from them. And I've heard other people with mental illness say the same thing. Maybe depression or something, they just feel disconnected. And I had that before I biked across Canada too. But when the disease hit, I went from muddling through life a little bit to just flat on my back, incapacitated, not knowing whether I was going to live or die from one moment to the next. It was terrifying. Someone saw me at my worst in 1994 walking down the front street of St. Andrews, and they said I looked like I was walking through a world of flying glass. I'm like, yeah, that's how it felt. Some people with schizophrenia, they might actually believe that the CIA is spying on them through their phone or their TV or something. I never had anything like that. They say schizophrenia is a split from reality. I never liked that term for myself. I always felt like I was reality-based. I saw a James Bond movie in my early years of my recovery, and it was scary for me because it literally felt like there were bullets being fired, cars crashing through walls right in the theater. But I knew that actually wasn't happening. So with schizophrenia, people often think about hallucinations. 75% of people with schizophrenia have hallucinations. I didn't. I never did. Those hallucinations can be any of the five senses, and they can also be positive, pleasurable, enjoyable. And people can sometimes have a mix of them, sometimes good, sometimes bad. So I never had any problems with substance abuse. I was lucky that way. I never had any inclination to drink or smoke or do any drugs or anything. I was very happy about that because I was barely getting through my own schizophrenia, just that itself.
As a means to self-medicate, as a lot of people with mental illness, and for so many reasons do that are very understandable. Did you find too, though, where depression and anxiety were concerned, was that exacerbated by the idea of what people think schizophrenia is? Did that have an impact on how you handled having the diagnosis?
It's very confusing. Part of me knew it was going on a lot of the time. It's like if you're drunk, you know how to walk a straight line or speak clearly, but you can't. You walk crooked and you slur, but you just can't do it. Your body's taking over. And that's how I felt. My body just couldn't do things. I couldn't think the right way. I couldn't. The emotions are very intense. The depression, you just feel so negative about stuff. The anxiety literally felt like I had a machete through my chest and someone was just grinding it into me all day long. That's how it felt. It wasn't something, I yearned for something as nice as butterflies in my stomach. I did not have that. It was really difficult. So the confusion, it was difficult. I described it as not having a common sense, and not common sense like logic. Common sense is just like how to communicate with people, how to, when to pause at the end of a sentence, voice inflections. Sometimes I think we speak more robotically, more monotone, that sort of thing. They call it affect. That might be sort of facial expressions, more sort of just blunted. And confusion, so it's hard to, so for one thing, all of a sudden in a matter of weeks I became very confused. The disease hit really hard and I couldn't think properly. And then they say, okay, you've got this disease, which I knew nothing about, so I'm trying to think about what this disease actually is while not being able to think properly. And then there's all the stigma of, okay, Matthew, don't tell people you've got schizophrenia. It's not, I mean, back in the 90s, don't even talk about mental health. So the last 10, 12 years of talking about mental health so much more, and now with COVID just bringing mental health out into the open so much more, it's been easier for me. But I'll be honest, I caught myself the other night here in St. Andrews, as much as we're talking about mental health, I was talking to somebody about schizophrenia. And again, I lowered my voice when I said the word schizophrenia, right here in a pub in St. Andrews, where nothing ever happens. I should feel very safe here in town, but I still, it's just I didn't even mean to. It's just a reaction that goes through me. I'm like, wow, I'm still lowering my voice. Yet I say online all about schizophrenia and that I've got it. I talk about it a lot online. Yet in a when there's strangers around, I lower my voice, and I don't like that. They say that a lot of people think we might be violent. And that was, to answer your question, that was confusing for me. Like, am I going to hurt somebody? I never had any thoughts of doing that. I was never a violent person. And the stats are, it's difficult. Violence can be difficult to define. There's kicking, biting, scratching, psychological violence, bar fights, and then the extreme scale is murders. In Canada, the rate is 1 per 150,000, 1 out of 150,000 people per year are murdered in Canada. The violence rate, depending on how you define it, is 2%, let's say. The Schizophrenia Society of Saskatchewan uses 1 in 5,000, so that's a big difference. It's defined differently. But for 2%, say 2% of the general population is violent. It's the exact same for people with schizophrenia, 2%. It's as ridiculous as saying, oh, you're left-handed? You got to be careful of those left-handed people. Don't tell anybody you're left-handed. It's that ridiculous. The BC Society, BC Schizophrenia Society said that the rate of violence can be higher for people with schizophrenia if they're untreated. And what I want to find out is, what is that rate? Is it, instead of like 2% for the general population, is it like 3% or 10%? And I'm going to email them here soon to find out what that is, because these stats can help get rid of these stigmas. I should be able to walk down and say the word schizophrenia in my hometown, a very sleepy hometown. A big city might be different. But it was confusing. It was I was scared. You know, I wasn't scared. I never thought that I'd hurt somebody. But it's when you're confused like that, and just all these thoughts going through your head, you're thinking, "Oh my gosh, will I? Is this what schizophrenia means? Is that what it means?" So years went by, and then I finally read that stat of people with schizophrenia are no more prone to violence than the rest of the general population. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, thank you for telling me this." I mean, it took years to happen, but it's. Yeah, I've never wanted to hit anybody ever in my life, ever.
I remember you telling me when we talked before this interview, and it stood out to me, is that I have no role models. And a lot of that has to do with stigma. And I have so much respect to you for it. I deal with it in my own life, my own mental health journeys with addiction, is that there's certain things that are still very stigmatized. And it is hard to talk about. I think of myself as a very comfortable person who's had to say things out loud, in part to make myself accept them more. And I feel the same way as you when I catch myself being hesitant to talk about it and also relate myself to it. It makes me question how far I've come. So I have so much respect for what you're doing, and I know it's partly for yourself, and I know how much of that is for other people. And when you said you have no role models, I can't tell you how much I respect that you decided to be that role model for somebody else. But where did you look when you didn't have someone? I mean, it must have made the journey all the more terrifying.
Yeah, years have gone by. I kept a diary for years, and I never looked back at it for many years. And then 10, 15 years after I started writing in it, I went back and read everything. I wrote nothing about schizophrenia except one line. When I was in the hospital, first diagnosed, and I said, I have no role model. I know nobody who's gone through this or come out the other side. And I didn't even know anybody who had it. And years have gone by. Bill McPhee, he started the Schizophrenia Digest magazine in Canada. It also went into the States. He has schizophrenia, and he was publishing a magazine. When he first decided to do that, people were saying, Bill, like, you've got schizophrenia. Do you really want to take on publishing a national magazine? He did. It was great. It ran for 20 years or more. And there are other people. There's a lawyer, Ellen Sachs, I think her name is. She's a lawyer, I think, with schizophrenia. She's got online. And so in one of Bill's magazines, Schizophrenia Digest, one issue they had a picture of this cyclist in full gear training. And it's the front cover of the magazine. Here I am going around a corner on my road bike, all decked out in gear. He had schizophrenia. and he trained for hours a week, so many hours a day, a week, whatever it was, and raced competitively wherever he was in Canada. I think Ontario, could have been somewhere else. But I'm like, wow, how do you do that? How do you do that? I'd already biked across Canada. I could sit in the saddle for hours at a time, but with schizophrenia, I just couldn't do it. I could walk. I went for long walks. I hear other people say that too with mental illness or schizophrenia. So-and-so walks a lot. I did a lot too. But regular exercise to build up that cardio and to get better and better and better and competitively, I wanted to, I just couldn't. So, yeah.
And yet, you were saying to me last week when we spoke that symptoms have been milder at this point in your life. Can you talk to me a little bit about that, light at this point in your life where you're finding life so much more manageable, just to offer, I think, some hope. Maybe someone young who's just newly diagnosed who's watching this might be interested in seeing where your journey's at now.
First off, I want to say that the schizophrenia advocate, she's 25 in Saskatchewan. She's doing things at 25 with schizophrenia that I was not doing. And I asked her, why is that? Is it your medication? What is it? She said she really didn't know. Maybe it is the medication. For me, I got into medication. With schizophrenia, they say because it's so severe, you're often going to need medication. At 22, I did not want to be ball and chain to a medication. And plus with depression, I couldn't see any positive out of it. So I'm like, oh gosh, do I have to be on medication? But at the same time, I was like, get that drug into me. It was something I could do, and it worked. I stayed on it. I noticed an improvement in my health every single week. Every single week. And often in the early years, weirdly enough, it was often on a Wednesday. Sometimes Tuesday, sometimes Thursday. That was just freaky. I don't know why I did that. But for years I improved and improved and improved. In the early year or two, roughly, the pain was intense. And for people recently diagnosed, I want to tell you that the pain can lessen. It may not go away as soon as you want, but it can lessen. And when it goes down to a more bearable level, then you can carry on for longer. And I had no idea that I'd be able to last. I had 27 years before my pain stopped. February 11th, 2021, my symptoms just stopped. They just stopped. The last symptom to go was like sort of a jarring sensation visually. The whole disconnected, it felt like the GPS part of my brain, things were just it felt like I was on tumble dry visually with sounds. Didn't know where sounds were coming from in some ways. In other ways, I could tell, yes, it's over there, but there's something in your brain that's mixed up that way. And it was sort of like if someone shows you their photos from their holiday, here's us in front of this building, here's us in this cafe, here's us here and here, but you don't know where all those buildings are in that. Say they're in visiting Rome, you don't know where they all are. But if you had a map and they showed you this is where everything is, okay, that's where everything is. Or if you were there with them, you'd know. But for me, it was just this sort of every day, all day long, was this visually photo. I didn't really know where they were coming from. It's just very visually just bombarding me. But it slowly left me, and the last thing to go was this visual jarring sensation of, oh, everything's just where it should be. Everything's calm, that chair's over there, the ceiling isn't, up there, or the roof, the floor and ceiling aren't all on tumble dry. It's just, oh, everything just is where it is. The last year and a half, I've had, it's sort of state of shock or of just like, wow, I've got peace and contentment now. I've had full, complete thoughts that don't go round and round chasing their tail. And I get to think about things. And it was August 20th, I made a post on Facebook shortly after saying, it literally felt like I'd been swimming across an ocean, shark-infested ocean, for 20 plus years. And I'd finally crawled up onto the shore and caught my breath and said, wow, I'm actually home. I'm actually here in a normal life again. And I've been waiting for that year since 1994. August 28th, I was in a good mood. And it stayed with me all day. I was this lighthearted, jovial, playful, oh, just do this, do this, do this, instead of just sort of head down with your burden on your back, plodding ahead. It was just like, oh, I get to be more, just body language more up and everything, and it stayed with me. I mean, yes, I've got some times of stress or whatever in the last, since August 28th, but it's just, I'm in the normal realm of emotions again. And I mean, I'm stronger because of it. I'm more confident. And my confidence is growing daily, just in things I'm doing, and it's a real treat. I didn't know if I'd ever get here. I was never guaranteed full, complete recovery. I didn't know if I'd ever get here, and I have.
These, I think, are the stories that I feel lucky enough, because I know you, to know, but that the public doesn't get to hear unless people like you tell your story. What inspires you to continue advocating? I know that you've been on CHCO before. I've seen you on CBC. You make a dedicated effort to keeping your story in the public eye, and also talking to other people with schizophrenia.
I enjoy public speaking. I enjoy being on camera. Like, I really enjoy it, and I'm not afraid to do it. I can do it, and I look forward to it. And people say I'm a good speaker. So I've got these abilities, and I'm thinking, Matthew, if you don't use these to help some people, you are really going to regret it. And so I've been reading books for years on how to advocate, fundraise, make a website, get on social media, public speak, all these sorts of things. And I've been reading those since like 2010. And it was 2018 and I made my website, mindaid.ca, and I'm trying to help other people. My main focus is mental health in developing countries, because they've got it worse than us. I do also want to be an advocate for people with schizophrenia. I'm trying to help people where I can. Yeah.
So how do people follow your journey online? Is it mindaid.ca is the best way to do so? Yeah,
mindaid.ca, and my social media handles are there. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. And in the About section of mindaid.ca, I have, there's a link there to all my links on Linktree. I've got many, many links there on all the things I've got going on. So.
And if someone is interested in having you as a public speaker, I know that's a new avenue you're going down more frequently. Yeah. Do they get in touch with you that way? I know there are a lot of mental health symposiums that take place, and someone like you could be a great...
Sign me up. Sign me up. I'll come and speak.
How do they do that? Same way?
Email. The email's in the contact section. It's info@mindaid.ca. Social media. Yeah, I've got an e-speakers page near the top of mindaid.ca. You can sign me up as a public speaker there, or just message me or email me. Yeah, I'm open to, yeah.
Well, Matthew, I would love to have you back again soon to continue this mental health conversation, because I think it's an important one. Even just on the topic of stigma, I think that there's still so much of that exists. I know, as I mentioned, in my own avenues, it still exists, and definitely for schizophrenia, adding your voice to that movement of destigmatization is so powerful. So I thank you so much for that, really, from the bottom of my heart. What you're doing is probably more special than even you realize, so thank you.
You're welcome.
And thank you for being here today, and I hope you come back soon.
I will, certainly.
My guest today has been mental health advocate Matthew Dickson. I'm Vicki Hogarth. Thank you for watching Southwest Magazine.
Southwest Magazine is a news and public affairs production of CHCO Television.